Hey everyone, welcome back to Horsetooth Cinema. And today I've got another blockbuster type review for you. Today I'm going to be talking about Top Gun Maverick. This is the sequel to the 1980s Top Gun film, and it was directed by Joseph Kosinski. So, funny story about this movie. So, when I was a little kid, maybe age 5 to 7, Top Gun was probably my favorite movie of all time. I think I watched it close to 40 or 50 times just between in that period of my life, which just makes sense for a little boy. I mean, you grow up wanting to fly planes. I have members of my family who have flown planes. And it's just sort of like you're living vicariously through it. It's like you're sort of dreaming through the movie. But I probably hadn't seen that original film for at least 10 years before rewatching it again this year before the new one. And so yeah, I rewatched it with my family and my girlfriend, and it did not hold up very well. It's not awful or anything. It definitely has its moments. It's just nice, campy, military fun with some Highway to the Danger Zone, thrown in there. But beyond that, I didn't find the story very engaging, and I kind of thought it was a very not self-aware piece of military propaganda. I could have enjoyed it more if it was like witty about and again very self-aware about that aspect of itself, but I just really didn't think it was. Campy doesn't necessarily mean witty. I just remember laughing at a lot of moments that I don't think I was supposed to laugh at, and not laughing at moments where I think the film wanted me to, which isn't a great sign. So I wasn't exactly enamored with the idea that there was going to be a sequel to this film that I was very meh on upon a rewatch. But after seeing it, I do have to say I enjoyed it, and I at least think it's head and shoulders much better than the original film. The plot of this film is that after 30 years of service as one of the Navy's top aviators, Pete Maverick Mitchell finds himself training a detachment of Top Gun graduates for a specialized mission, the likes of which they've never seen before. Maverick is then drawn into a confrontation with his own deepest fears, culminating in a mission that demands the ultimate sacrifice from those who will be chosen to fly in it. I think why I liked this more than the original film is mainly the writing. The original film mostly seems like a bunch of little bits chopped up and thrown into this patriotic soup or whatever. Character motivations aren't all that strong, and whenever there's a break in between those amazing plane action sequences, and you sort of get the side drama, a lot of it just kind of feels straight out of 80s comedies. Like, it's not exactly very engaging. Top Gun Maverick improves on the writing considerably. The two main characters, Maverick and Rooster, as well as some of the other minor characters, they really have arcs here, well-defined arcs, which was very lacking, I think, in the original film. All of the drama outside of the planes, whenever they're not doing these amazing airborne action sequences, that all feels much more engaging as well. You understand the conflict here, especially between Maverick and Goose. You understand their issues with one another and why they haven't resolved them in the past. And it sort of builds up to eventually their confrontation. All of it has a payoff by the end of the film. It all feels like it builds to a climax, as opposed to the original film where, again, it just feels like little bits chopped together. One little thing that I wish they had clarified is Jennifer Connelly's character. Now, I think the original love interest from the first film, she's not in this movie. I don't know why, I'd have to look into that, but yeah, they bring in Jennifer Connelly, who they basically say is, they imply that she and Maverick have had some sort of a thing in the past. But at the same time, especially as somebody who's not a massive fan of the original film or anything, at least today, I kept thinking, like, wait, was she in the original film? And my girlfriend and I kept looking at each other and we were like, who the fuck is she? Like, why is she here? And her role in the movie is fine. It's just, I don't really understand the origin of where she came from. I just think they could have done a better job explaining that. That's a small issue, but it was noticeable, and my girlfriend and I kept looking at each other and we were like, what is going on here? Technically as well, though, I think this is just such a big improvement on the original. Normally, I don't like to praise special effects these days because, basically every movie that comes out today, if it has a big enough budget, will have really good special effects. And the idea of special effects, I mean, it's way less special than it was in maybe the era of New Hollywood with like Star Wars and things like that. However, I think there are rare instances where how special effects are utilized really deserves praise, and I think this is definitely an example. Just the use of practical effects and plane stunts. Not that they're not in the original, of course they are, but it's just so much better executed here, and you really feel the tension. Everything about it felt real to me, and my palms were, of course, just sweating in that third act. I even like Hans Zimmer's score to a degree. Now, I have mixed feelings on Hans Zimmer. I like a lot of his more experimental scores where he's getting a little bit weirder with the instrumentation. I'm thinking of something like Interstellar or Dune, but I'm not crazy on a lot of his more like standard scores, especially kind of the more recent ones where they just sort of assault you with like brrr. Especially when he uses that with like Christopher Nolan's like kind of introspective sci-fi films like Inception. I just don't really get why that like, you know, bass heaviness is needed. Now, this score for Top Gun Maverick, I wouldn't listen to it on its own. It is a lot of what I just mentioned. It's not very creative either, but the way it's utilized in especially the third act of this movie, I think really worked for the tension. So I have to give a little bit of credit to Hans Zimmer. It just really enhances the tension overall for me. There's one other little thing too that I have to praise just because I think it's so rare nowadays, and it's that this film had a lot of opportunity for, you know, to just kind of throw in a bunch of fan service. And I was really pleasantly surprised that it didn't do it all that often. I really don't like fan service just for the sake of it. You can kind of maybe refer to my Spider-Man No Way Home review or something for my thoughts on that. But yeah, I just kind of think that when it becomes too self-referential, the point gets lost really fast, and it takes me out of it. I prefer when they do more subtle, like visual callbacks, like with the shot composition or something, if it's not too obvious. And there are a couple, I don't want to say obvious, but distinct callbacks visually to the original here. But by and large, I do think this film makes an effort to strain away from that a little bit more than most movies do nowadays. The film does open, of course, with the jets taking off on the aircraft carrier and Highway to the Danger Zone starts playing, but it's really brief. I think it goes on much longer in the original movie. There's a moment also where they almost do a visual callback to the guy who like spills his coffee all over himself when the planes take off, but it doesn't do that. It kind of cuts away before that can happen. And I thought that was a nice touch to, like, just sort of say, hey, we're not just gonna cash in on the fan service here. I just enjoyed that for the most part it really had the confidence to be its own thing, which is something you don't see that much of nowadays. Now, with all of this praise, with all that being said, I do think this film is a little overrated. It's being praised kind of, maybe at the level of like Mad Max Fury Road or, some revolutionary action movie that's come out in the past 10 years or so. And I just don't think it's quite at that level. I think most of my problems with this film have to do with problems that were also in the first film that this one just couldn't get away from. Firstly, I think it's a really big problem, like how in both movies, you don't really know who the enemy is. I don't remember if they say it was the Soviet Union in the first one. I mean, there's clearly a lot of Cold War stuff, hanging over everything. I don't remember if it was explicitly stated or not, but in this one, for sure, they never explicitly say who the enemy is, who this target is that they have to take out. Even though obviously it takes place in a very cold environment, they have nukes, etc. So, like, it's Russia. We all know it's Russia. I understand why they don't say that it's Russia, especially in today's political climate where we have a literal war in Ukraine. But we all know it is Russia, and to pretend it isn't, I think, is a little feckless. And especially knowing that the Pentagon funded this film and the original film, it just feels like they want to get their propaganda out there without really admitting that that's what they're doing, without having the guts to call out exactly who they want to call out. More importantly though, if we don't know who the enemy is or why they're a threat, that dramatically lessens the stakes for the film. And even during that crazy climax, the one that everyone's talking about, and I agree, it's amazing technically, I never stopped feeling that maybe the film was still lacking something in terms of stakes. So a good comparison of what I'm talking about here is a movie like Zero Dark 30 by Catherine Bigelow, for example. One of my favorite movies of all time, really. And in that film, you understand why exactly we need to get Osama bin Laden. It's not just that he's this bad guy that the US government doesn't like, it's that, his ideology has influenced Al-Qaeda to mostly target the United States as opposed to overseas targets. Therefore, it's in the US's security interest to get him, compared to potentially other targets. So there's real weight when they go after him in that really cool helicopter raid sequence. And in Top Gun Maverick, there's still weight in the final action sequences, but it's only weight in terms of what we feel about the characters rather than the situation and just sort of the mission overall. Secondly, even though characters in this film do have arcs, as I mentioned, well-defined arcs, there are a series of cop-outs in the third act specifically, where even though the arcs of these characters are fulfilled and met, the impact of them is lessened by, again, what I would consider cop-outs. Consequences could have been a lot greater than they ended up being, and I kept wanting the film to go more in the direction of something like No Time to Die, the James Bond, most recent James Bond film. And if you have seen that movie, you probably know where I'm going with this, but the film didn't really, Top Gun Maverick anyway, didn't really go in that direction, and I was disappointed in that. It seemed just like it didn't really have the courage to do that. Now, these cop-out elements also lead to a massive tonal shift in the movie, because something happens as a result of them that I just really wasn't expecting in a Top Gun movie, where, especially this one, where it sort of, recognizes itself as a very grounded reboot of this original film that seems quite realistic, and then it becomes kind of like a spy movie, again, maybe like a James Bond film. It's fun, at least. I mean, I enjoyed watching that sequence, but it didn't really feel like it belonged in the rest of the movie. I feel like the impact of what they were going for could have, worked better if they had taken a lot of that sequence out of the film, and if they had just faded to black a little bit earlier. All of those problems being said, I did really enjoy this movie. And again, like I've alluded to, there isn't much wrong with this new film that isn't worse in the original, which means that this is a really good sequel. And of course, it's just much better in terms of the practical effects and all of that. It's much better than the mindless schlock, CGI schlock that you usually get in box office blockbuster movies today. So I'm gonna give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I don't think it's as good as people are hyping it up to be, but I did really enjoy it, and of course I'd recommend you go see it if you haven't. Anyway, that's my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, you can like the video down below and subscribe to the channel if you want. I've got more content coming out soon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.